All right, welcome to video number 5. Again, video number 5 of the Developing Professional Conduct and Ethical Practices. This is your 6-hour home study course, pre-licensing course. Please get your book. We are actually on page 26 and 27. I want to go through this quiz. It's the fair housing quiz. Now, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time going into the details of fair housing. Again, I presume that you've already taken your other 2 pre-licensing classes and that you've already, you know some of this already. But it is kind of fun and it's part of the course. So let's do the quiz here. And what I want you to do is I'm going to read the question, pause the video, and try to come up with the answer. And then I'm going to give you the answer. So that way there, it's a learning tool as well if you utilize it correctly. Test question number 1. Again, this quiz is on page 26. Testers may approach a housing provider without any intention of procuring housing. Now, just FYI, a tester is someone who is trained and their sole job is to lie to you. They pose as a tenant, a prospective tenant. They will pose to you as a prospective buyer. And their job is to see if any of your conduct violates the fair housing laws. And then there's punishment and so on and so forth. We call them testers. They are testing you to see how trained you are in fair housing. So is this a true or false? Pause it. And then if you want the answer, hit go. And the answer is true. It is. It is true. Number 2, an owner of a single-family home is exempt from federal fair housing laws if the owner does not own or have interest, that's an ownership interest, in more than 3 single-family houses at once. Now, one thing I want to point out here, it says more than 3, not 3 or more. The test question could say more than 3 or 4 or more. Okay, it means the same thing, and the wording, you just have to be careful. Is that true or false? And the answer is true. That is one of the exemptions, what we call Mrs. Murphy's exemption to the federal fair housing law. All right, let's go to question number 3. An aggrieved party may file a complaint if they can prove they are a member of a protected class. They are financially qualified to obtain the property, but they were rejected by the defendant, and that the housing opportunity remained open after the rejection. Can they file a complaint based on that scenario? And yes, they can. Number 4, discrimination needs to be intentional before a complaint can be filed. And the answer is false. Intentionality has nothing to do with it. In fact, what I have found as a fair housing trainer is most of the time when I do what's called sensitivity training, this is where they were found in violation or pled guilty to some kind of fair housing issue. It was a technical or an administrative error, and they had no intention whatsoever to discriminate. Number 5, the protected classes under fair housing laws are, what do you think? A, B, C, or D? And the correct answer is race, religion, sex, color, disability, family status, or what's called familial status, and national origin. There are 7 federally protected classes. Number 6, federal fair housing exemption categories include A, B, C, or D. And the answer is all of the above. We have Mrs. Murphy's exemption, we have private clubs, and we have religious organizations. So for example, if there's a convent, a Catholic convent, they can say, listen, the convent it can only be occupied by nuns, for example. They're affiliated with the Catholic Church. We could have private clubs. Maybe a private club owns 2 rental properties. They could say, listen, we only rent to our members. And of course, we have Mrs. Murphy's exemption as well that we talked about previously. So all of the above are federal fair housing exemptions. And I guarantee you're going to need to know that for your real estate licensing exam. Number 7, the definition of a disability includes both physical and mental challenges. And actually, I would rephrase this question to say physical and mental disabilities. And the answer is true. Number 8, disparate treatment is intentional acts of discrimination treated at those protected by the law. And the answer is true. Number 9, steering is when? A, B, C, or D? The answer is C. The real estate broker makes decisions for buyers or renters about where they should live. They're steering them. Now, one thing about steering, a lot of times with real estate professionals, it's not intentional. Doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. Let me give you an example to illustrate this. In Omaha, Nebraska, where I'm at, according to the census data, the predominant population of African Americans live north of Dodge Street and east of 120th. That's just statistically proven. I mean, that's the fact. Let's say that I'm a real estate professional and I have an African American couple come in and they say, Paul, I want you to find me a house. You're a great agent. By the way, we're qualified FHA through Wells Fargo, and we qualified up to $200,000, so on and so forth. So I start giving them homes for sale to look at, but I only give them homes in North Omaha, which is north of Dodge Street and east of 120th, which is where African Americans predominantly live. That is steering, right? If I would just say, here are all the properties that qualify according to your type of financing, and I gave them all of them that's available in the Omaha area, I would be fine. Or if the party says, hey, Paul, we want to live in this part of town, then they have defined the parameters, and that would not be steering. All right, number 10, Title VII prohibits property owners from refusing to make reasonable modifications to the dwelling to accommodate a tenant's disability. This includes, now, real quickly, a reasonable modification is where the tenant goes to the property owner and asks that they make a modification, a physical modification to the home. A reasonable accommodation, which is another term, that's where they're asking you to make an exception to a policy. For example, let's say someone is blind and they have a seeing eye dog, or they have mental health issues and they have a dog, a comfort dog, and you have a no pets policy. That would be a reasonable accommodation request. A modification would be actual physical changes to the property, like a wheelchair ramp. All right, so what is the answer, A, B, C, or D? And it is C, installation of grab bars around bathtubs and toilets. 11, disclosing information about a property or neighborhood's population, which is part of any protected class, is discriminatory housing practice prohibited by law. And the answer is true. Number 12, 1 year is allowed to file an alleged discriminatory practice complaint. And the answer is true. You have 1 year from the date of the alleged violation to file a complaint. Question 13 in your quiz. Fair housing regulations prohibit the use of the words "no children" in an advertisement. What do you think? The answer is true. That is true. And number 14, which of the following statements, which one is true? A, B, C, or D? What do you think? And the answer is D. Real estate advertisements may not state an explicit preference, limitation, or discrimination based on family status. So you couldn't say single moms, you couldn't say no single people, no kids, those type of things. All right, that's been your fair housing quiz. Now, as I said in the previous video, you must turn this quiz into the office. So for you to get your completion certificate, we need a 70% on your exam, and this quiz must be turned in at some point as well before you can get your completion certificate. So make sure you give this to us. All right. 28, 29, and 30 is basically just Scenarios, I highly encourage you. We're not going to go through these, but they're different fair housing scenarios and those type of things. It's great reading and a good learning tool. Again, I highly encourage you to read through that. All right, let's go on to the next video.